The observation deck of the Imperial flagship Endless Victory was completely silent. High Commander X stood there with his forearms crossed behind his back. His yellow eyes were fixed on the massive display screen that covered the entire wall in front of him. The screen showed something that made no sense, something that should not exist. "Run the scan again," he said quietly. His second-in-command, a young officer named looked nervous. She had already run the scan 15 times. Each time the results were the same. Each time the computer told them something impossible. "High Commander," she said carefully, "I have checked everything. The sensors are working correctly. The readings are accurate." X did not turn around. He kept staring at the screen. On it, thousands of ships hung in the darkness of space. They were arranged in a perfect formation like birds flying together. But these were not birds. These were warships. And they were bigger than anything the Empire had ever built. "How many?" he asked. 14,217 vessels, High Commander. Each one is approximately 3 times the size of our largest dreadnought. 3 times, X felt something cold move through his body. It was fear. He had not felt fear in a very long time. The Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for 9,000 years. They had conquered over 400 species. They had destroyed anyone who stood against them. Fear was something other species felt, not the... But now, looking at those ships, X was afraid. "What species?" he demanded. A hesitated. "The database cannot identify them. Their ships do not match any known design. Their materials are not in our records. Their energy output is..." She stopped, checking her screen again as if hoping the numbers had changed. They had not. "Their energy output is beyond our ability to measure accurately." "Beyond our ability? Explain." "Each ship appears to be generating more power than our entire home system's sun, High Commander. Our sensors were not designed to measure such values. They keep returning error messages." X finally turned around. His face was hard, but his eyes showed the worry he felt inside. "That is impossible. Nothing generates that much power, nothing." "I know, High Commander, but the readings do not lie." The bridge crew had stopped working. Everyone was listening. Everyone was scared. X could see it in their faces, in the way they held themselves, in the nervous movements of their hands. These were trained soldiers, veterans of a dozen campaigns. They had seen death and delivered it without hesitation. Now they looked like children facing something they did not understand. "Where did they come from?" X asked. "These ships did not exist yesterday. Our long-range sensors would have detected a fleet this size approaching." A shook her head. "They did not approach, High Commander. One moment the space was empty. The next moment they were there, all of them, at exactly the same time." "That is not possible. Ships cannot simply appear from nothing." "I know, High Commander." X turned back to the screen. The fleet hung there, motionless, silent, waiting. It made no aggressive moves. It sent no messages. It simply existed, a wall of metal and power that blocked the path forward. And somewhere on one of those ships, or perhaps on all of them, were the beings who had built this impossible armada. Humans. The name still sounded strange to ears. They had first learned it 8 months ago, when an exploration vessel stumbled upon a small planet in an unremarkable solar system. The planet was called Earth. The creatures who lived there called themselves humans. At first, the Empire had not been concerned. Humans were weak. They had soft bodies with no natural armor. They had only 2 eyes, which limited their vision. They had no claws, no venom, no telepathic abilities. Their ships were primitive, powered by simple fusion reactors. Their weapons were laughable compared to Imperial technology. The standard procedure was simple. Send a diplomatic vessel. Deliver the ultimatum. Join the Empire peacefully or be destroyed. It was the same offer given to every species they encountered. Most accepted immediately. The few who refused were dealt with quickly and forgotten. The humans had been different. Their representative, a female named Lisa Morgan, had listened to the ultimatum without expression. She had asked questions about the Empire, its history, its culture, its goals. She had taken notes. She had been polite, even friendly. And when the Imperial diplomat finished speaking, she had smiled and said something that still echoed through the halls of power. Thank you for explaining your position. We will need some time to consider our response. In the meantime, we respectfully request that your ships remain outside our territory. We would not want any accidents to occur." The Imperial diplomat had laughed at her. He had explained in great detail what would happen to Earth if they did not submit. He had described the burning of cities, the death of billions, the complete erasure of human civilization from the galaxy. He had expected fear, begging, surrender. Lisa Morgan had continued smiling. "We understand. Please give us 30 days to prepare our answer." 30 days. The Empire had granted the request, mostly out of amusement. What could such a primitive species possibly do in 30 days? Build a few more of their pathetic ships, train a few more of their weak soldiers. It would make no difference. The outcome was already decided. But when the 30 days ended, things did not go as planned. The first Imperial patrol to enter human space after the deadline simply vanished. 20 ships gone without a trace. No distress calls, no wreckage, no bodies. They were there one moment and gone the next. The Empire sent a larger force to investigate. 50 warships, fully armed, commanded by an experienced admiral named, or he was confident, even eager. Primitive species sometimes got lucky. One ambush meant nothing. The Empire would crush this rebellion and move on. Admiral Orr's fleet entered human space broadcasting threats and demands. They traveled for 3 hours. Then they stopped responding to communications. When search vessels arrived at their last known position, they found all 50 ships floating in a perfect line, completely intact, completely powered down. Every crew member was alive but unconscious. Medical scans showed they had been asleep for approximately 48 hours. No one could explain how it happened. No one could explain why the humans had left them alive. Attached to Admiral Orr's flagship was a small metal plate with words written in perfect script. "This is your second warning. Please do not require a third." The Imperial Council met in emergency session. The 17 great houses sent their most powerful representatives. Arguments raged for days. Some wanted immediate retaliation. Others urged caution. A few suggested that perhaps, for the first time in 9,000 years, the Empire should consider negotiation. In the end, pride won over wisdom. The Council voted to mobilize the full Imperial Armada. 8 million warships would descend upon human space. They would find this primitive species and teach them the price of defiance. They would make an example so terrible that no other species would ever dare to resist again. High Commander X was chosen to lead the campaign. He was the Empire's greatest military mind, responsible for the conquest of 73 species and the destruction of 12 civilizations. His name was spoken with fear across 1,000 worlds. If anyone could crush the humans, it was him. He had accepted the command with confidence. He had assembled his fleet with pride. He had traveled to human space expecting an easy victory. Now he stood on his bridge, looking at 14,000 impossible ships, and he understood that everything he believed was wrong. "High Commander," said softly, "we are receiving a transmission." "From the human fleet." "Yes, High Commander, audio and visual. They are requesting communication." X straightened his uniform. Whatever was about to happen, he would face it with dignity. Put it through. The main screen flickered. The image of the human fleet was replaced by a face. It was a human male, older than the female diplomat they had met before. His hair was gray, cut short in a military style. His eyes were dark and calm. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations or medals. He looked like someone who did not need symbols to prove his authority. "High Commander X," the human said. His voice was steady, almost friendly. "My name is Admiral Christopher Hayes. I represent the United Earth Defense Force. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." X kept his face neutral. "You requested communication. I am listening." "I appreciate that. I know this situation must be confusing for you. Your empire has never encountered anything like us before. I want to be honest with you about what is happening and what your options are." "My options?" X felt anger rising in his chest. "You dare speak to me of options? I command 8 million warships. Your fleet, impressive as it may appear, is outnumbered more than 500 to 1. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. You are correct about the numbers, but numbers are not everything, High Commander. You have already seen evidence of this. Your patrols disappeared. Your investigation fleet was neutralized without a single casualty. We did not harm your people because we did not want to, but make no mistake, we could have destroyed them completely. Empty threats, you caught us by surprise. That will not happen again. High Commander, with respect, you are still underestimating us. Let me explain something. The Admiral leaned forward slightly. The ships you see in front of you are not crewed by living beings. They are autonomous. Each one contains manufacturing facilities, advanced artificial intelligence, and self-repair capabilities. In the 4 months it took your Armada to travel here, we built 3,000 of them from raw materials we gathered along the way. X felt the cold fear returning. You are lying. I am not. Furthermore, what you see here is not our full strength. This is approximately 2% of our available military assets. We mobilized this particular force because we calculated it would be sufficient to stop your invasion without excessive destruction. 2%. The number echoed in X's mind. If the human was telling the truth, their total military power was beyond imagination. It was beyond anything the Empire had ever faced. It was beyond anything he could comprehend. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I want to give you a choice. Admiral Hayes's expression softened slightly. We know your empire operates on a simple principle: the strong rule the weak. It has worked for you for 9,000 years, but the galaxy is changing, High Commander. There are things out there beyond the edges of known space that make your empire and our species equally small, equally vulnerable. What things? Threats you cannot imagine, threats we have spent centuries preparing for. That is why we built these ships. That is why we developed this technology, not to conquer others, but to survive what is coming. X stared at the screen. The human's face showed no deception, no fear, no pride. He spoke like a teacher explaining a difficult concept to a student. It was infuriating. It was also terrifying. You expect me to believe that you, a species we discovered only 8 months ago, have somehow become more powerful than the greatest empire in the galaxy? I expect you to look at the evidence in front of you and draw your own conclusions. Admiral Hayes gestured at something off-screen. Your sensors are not malfunctioning, High Commander. Those ships are real. That power is real. We are real. The only question is what you want to do about it. What I want is irrelevant. My orders are clear. I am to subjugate your species or destroy you. And if you cannot do either? The question hung in the air. X had no answer. In his entire career, failure had never been a possibility. The Empire always won. The Empire always conquered. That was the natural order of things. But looking at those 14,000 ships, he was no longer certain the natural order applied. What are you proposing? He asked finally. Turn around, take your fleet home. Report to your council that humanity is not worth the cost of conquest. We will establish formal diplomatic relations. We will share technology and knowledge. We will work together as partners, not as master and slave. And if I refuse? Admiral Hayes's expression did not change. Then we will be forced to demonstrate our capabilities more directly. Every ship in your armada will be disabled. Every crew member will be returned safely to Imperial space. You will have accomplished nothing except showing the galaxy that the Empire can be defeated. You would not kill us. We do not want to kill anyone, High Commander. We remember what it was like to be weak, to be afraid, to struggle for survival. We will not inflict that suffering on others unless we have absolutely no choice. But do not mistake our mercy for weakness. If you attack, we will stop you, completely and without question. X turned away from the screen. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his home world waited for news of victory. Somewhere out there, billions of expected him to crush these upstart humans and restore the natural order. But the natural order was already broken. He could see it in those massive ships, hanging in the darkness like sleeping giants. He could feel it in his hearts, which beat faster than they should. He could hear it in the silence of his crew, who waited for orders he did not know how to give. How long do I have to decide? He asked without turning around. Take the time you need, Admiral Hayes replied. We have waited a long time for this moment. We can wait a little longer. The transmission ended. The screen returned to showing the human fleet, unchanged, unmoved, patient as stone. X stood at the viewport for a long time. His mind raced through possibilities, strategies, tactics. He considered attack patterns, flanking maneuvers, concentrated fire. None of them seemed adequate. None of them accounted for ships that could appear from nothing, disable entire fleets without damage, and generate more power than stars. Eventually, he turned to face his bridge crew. They looked at him with hope, with fear, with trust. They believed in him. They believed he would find a way. He was not sure he could. "Summon my senior officers," he said quietly. "All fleet commanders, all division leaders, we need to discuss our situation." "Yes, High Commander," began transmitting the order to the entire Armada. While he waited, X walked to his private quarters. The room was simple, decorated only with trophies from past campaigns, weapons taken from defeated enemies, flags of conquered worlds, symbols of victory accumulated over 300 years of service. They all seemed meaningless now. He sat at his desk and activated his personal terminal. He began composing a message, not to his officers, not to the council, but to someone else entirely, someone who might understand what he was feeling. His mentor, Old Admiral, had retired 50 years ago. He lived on a small world at the edge of imperial space, far from politics and war. He had seen the Empire at its height and survived its worst crises. If anyone could offer wisdom, it was him. "Honored teacher," X wrote, "I face a situation for which no training has prepared me, an enemy that cannot be defeated by force, a choice between honor and survival. I do not know what to do. Any guidance you can offer would be welcome." He sent the message, knowing it would take days to reach its destination and days more for a reply to return. By then, the situation would likely be resolved, one way or another. A chime indicated that his officers had assembled. X rose, straightened his uniform once more, and walked to the conference room. 12 fleet commanders waited for him. They were the elite of the Imperial military, beings who had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. Their faces showed confusion, anger, and fear in various mixtures. None of them looked confident. "You have all seen the situation," X began without preamble. "You have all heard the transmission from the human commander. I want your assessment." Admiral Orr spoke first. He was the oldest among them, with experience dating back nearly 500 years. "It is a bluff. It must be. No species developed such technology in mere centuries. They are trying to frighten us into retreat." "And if it is not a bluff?" asked Admiral Oss, commander of the Third Fleet. She was younger, known for her strategic mind. "Our scans show those ships are real. The energy readings are real. We cannot simply ignore evidence because we do not like it." "Evidence can be faked. Sensor data can be manipulated." "Our sensors are shielded against manipulation. You know this. Whatever those ships are, they are not illusions." The argument continued, voices rising and falling. Some wanted to attack immediately, trusting in numbers to overwhelm any defense. Others urged caution, pointing out that the humans had already demonstrated abilities beyond imperial understanding. A few suggested retreat, though they framed it as strategic repositioning to save face. Through it all, X listened. He watched his officers debate the same questions that tormented him. He saw their fear hidden behind bravado, their uncertainty masked by aggression. They were soldiers, trained to fight and win. They did not know how to face an enemy they could not defeat. "Enough," he said finally. The room fell silent. "We have discussed what we know. Now I want to discuss what we do not know. Admiral Ara, you have studied human history. What can you tell us about this species?" Admiral Ara was the youngest commander in the room, appointed for her analytical abilities rather than combat experience. She stood, activating a display that showed images and data. "Humans evolved on a dangerous world," she began. "Their planet had extreme weather, predatory animals, natural disasters, and diseases that killed millions. Despite this, they survived. They adapted. They developed tools, then weapons, then technology. They fought each other constantly, wars that killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. They fought among themselves, Admiral or seemed surprised. That is inefficient. It was, but it also drove innovation. Each conflict pushed them to develop better weapons, better tactics, better organization. By the time they achieved space travel, they had thousands of years of military experience. That was primitive warfare. Chemical explosives, kinetic weapons, nothing compared to Imperial technology. True, but consider what they accomplished in the time since we discovered them. Admiral Ara changed the display. 8 months ago, they had fusion reactors and basic interstellar capability. Today, they have ships that generate stellar levels of energy and can appear from nowhere. In 8 months, they advanced further than most species do in. That is impossible, Admiral Or insisted. Evolution does not work that way. Perhaps they had help, Admiral Oss suggested. Perhaps they discovered ancient technology from a precursor race. Our surveys found no evidence of precursor artifacts in their territory. Then where did this technology come from? No one had an answer. The question hung in the air, another mystery in a situation already overflowing with them. X stood and walked to the display. He looked at the images of Earth, a small blue world that seemed utterly ordinary. Nothing about it suggested the power that apparently came from its inhabitants. There is another possibility, he said slowly. One that I hesitate to mention because it sounds like superstition rather than strategy. Speak, High Commander, Admiral Ara encouraged. At this point, we cannot afford to dismiss any theory. The old texts mention beings called the architects, creatures who existed before recorded history, who could reshape reality according to their will. They were said to have built the first stars and seeded life across the galaxy. Then they vanished, leaving only legends behind. Myths, Admiral Or scoffed, stories to frighten children. Perhaps, but every myth begins with truth. What if the architects were real? What if they did not vanish but simply waited? What if the humans are not what they appear to be? Silence filled the room. The idea was absurd, impossible, contrary to everything they believed about the universe. Yet looking at those impossible ships, impossible energy readings, impossible technology, suddenly absurdity did not seem like a strong enough objection. You are suggesting, Admiral Oss said carefully, that humans are the architects, that they have been hiding among primitive species, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. I am suggesting we do not know what we are dealing with, and when facing the unknown, caution is wiser than aggression. The meeting continued for several more hours. Arguments were made and countered. Strategies were proposed and rejected. Eventually, exhaustion set in, and the officers returned to their ships to rest and think. X did not rest. He returned to the observation deck and stood where he had stood before, watching the human fleet. It had not moved. It had not changed. It simply waited, patient and silent. What are you, he thought, what are you really? The night cycle passed. Morning brought no answers, only new reports. The human fleet remained stationary. No communications were received. No aggressive actions were taken. They simply waited as if time meant nothing to them. X made his decision. He walked to the communication center and opened a channel to the human flagship. The same admiral appeared on screen, looking as calm as before. High Commander, Admiral Hayes said, have you reached a conclusion? I have questions first. Ask them. X chose his words carefully. You spoke of threats beyond known space, things that make empires seem small. What are these threats? Admiral Hayes was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost sad. The universe is very old, High Commander, very old and very large. In all that time and space, countless civilizations have risen and fallen, most destroyed themselves. Others were destroyed by natural disasters, but some were erased by things that came from outside. Outside what? Outside everything. The darkness between galaxies, the void beyond the cosmic horizon, places where different rules apply. Places where things exist that should not exist. You speak in riddles. Because the truth is difficult to explain to those who have not seen it. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "We have looked into that darkness, High Commander. We have seen what waits there, and we have spent generations preparing to face it. The ships you see, the technology that frightens you, it was not built to conquer your empire. It was built to defend against something far worse." "And you expect me to believe this?" "I expect you to consider the evidence. You have ruled this region of space for 9,000 years. In all that time, have you ever wondered why you never encountered another empire of similar power? Why you were always the strongest, always the most advanced?" X had never considered the question. The empire had simply assumed it was naturally superior. That was the foundation of their culture, their religion, their identity. "We are strong because we are meant to be strong. You are strong because you have been sheltered." Admiral Hayes's voice carried no accusation, only truth. This region of space was protected long ago. Barriers were placed that kept the worst things out. But those barriers are failing. What is coming will not care about your empire or your strength or your history. It will consume everything in its path unless it is stopped. "And you believe you can stop it?" "We believe we can try, but not alone. That is why we are offering you a choice instead of simply destroying your fleet. We need allies, High Commander. We need every species willing to stand together against the coming storm." X stared at the screen. His mind struggled to process what he was hearing. Ancient barriers, cosmic threats. The Empire as a sheltered child rather than a dominant force. Everything he believed was being challenged, dismantled, replaced with a terrifying new reality. "If what you say is true," he said slowly, "why reveal it now? Why show us your power instead of simply watching us destroy ourselves?" "Because we believe in choice, free will, the right of every being to decide their own fate. We could have ignored your empire, let you continue your conquests, waited until the storm came and destroyed you along with everything else. Instead, we chose to intervene, to offer a different path. A path that requires us to admit weakness, to bow before humans. A path that requires you to accept partnership, to recognize that strength comes in many forms and that the greatest strength is found in cooperation." Admiral Hayes paused. "We do not want your submission, High Commander. We want your help." The words echoed in the silence. They were so different from everything X had been taught, everything his people believed. The Empire did not help others. The Empire did not partner with inferiors. The Empire conquered, ruled, dominated. But looking at those impossible ships, those impossible beings, he wondered if perhaps the Empire had simply been wrong all along. "I need time," he said finally. "This is not a decision I can make alone. The Council must be informed. The great houses must discuss this." "We understand. Take the time you need. We will remain here as a reminder of what is possible and what is at stake." The transmission ended. X stood alone on the bridge, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the soft glow of displays. His fleet waited behind him, 8 million ships full of soldiers who trusted him to lead them to victory. But perhaps victory did not mean what he thought it meant. Perhaps there was a greater battle coming, one that would require him to set aside everything he knew and become something new. He opened a channel to his officers. "All fleet commanders, this is High Commander X. We will not engage the enemy at this time. Prepare for a diplomatic mission. We have much to discuss." The acknowledgements came in quickly, tinged with confusion and relief. They had been prepared to fight and die. Now they were being asked to think and change. Perhaps that was the hardest battle of all. Hours later, a shuttle left the endless victory and flew toward the human fleet. It carried High Commander X and a small diplomatic team. They had no weapons, no guards, only a willingness to listen. The shuttle passed through the massive human ships, each one dwarfing it like a moon passing a grain of sand. Energy readings fluctuated wildly as they approached, but no hostile action was taken. They were expected. They were welcomed. The shuttle docked with the human flagship, a vessel called the Hope of Tomorrow. The name struck X as strangely optimistic for a warship, but perhaps that said something important about the beings who built it. Admiral Hayes met them in a simple meeting room. There were no thrones, no symbols of power, just a table with chairs and windows showing the stars. The human looked older up close, with lines on his face that spoke of worry and responsibility, but his eyes were kind. "Welcome aboard, High Commander," he said, offering the greeting gesture with surprising accuracy. "I hope this meeting is the beginning of something good for both our peoples." "As do I," X replied, "though I confess I do not know where to begin." "Begin with questions. That is how understanding starts." They talked for hours. X asked about human history, their technology, their culture, their beliefs. Admiral Hayes answered honestly, hiding nothing, explaining everything. He told of humanity's long struggle to survive on a hostile world, their wars and failures, their discoveries and triumphs. He told of the moment they looked into the void and saw what waited there. He told of the decision to prepare, to build, to become something greater than they had ever been. And slowly, X began to understand. These were not conquerors. They were not tyrants. They were survivors forged by hardship into something strong and wise. They had learned that true power came not from domination but from unity, not from fear but from hope. "Your ships," X said at one point, "the ones that require no crews. How did you create such things?" "We built minds," Admiral Hayes explained. "Not copies of our own minds, but new minds created specifically for certain tasks. They think faster than we do, see more than we can, understand things we cannot grasp. But they are still our children in a sense. We guide them, teach them, share with them, and in return they protect us." "You trust machines with your survival." "We trust our children. Some of them are made of flesh. Some of them are made of metal. It does not matter. They are all part of our family." The concept was alien to thinking. Machines were tools, nothing more. The idea of treating them as equals, as family, was strange and uncomfortable. But looking at those mighty ships, X could not deny the results. As the hours passed, other humans joined the meeting. Scientists explained their technology. Historians described their past. Philosophers discussed their values. Each one spoke with the same calm confidence, the same willingness to share, the same hope for cooperation. By the end, X understood something important. The humans were not lying. They were not bluffing. They genuinely wanted peace. They genuinely feared what was coming. And they genuinely believed that working together was the only way to survive. "I will take this message to my council," he said finally. "I cannot promise they will listen. Our people are proud. Change is difficult." "We understand," Admiral Hayes replied. "Change is always difficult, but sometimes it is also necessary. We will wait for your answer, however long it takes." "And if the answer is no, if the Council chooses war?" The Admiral's expression did not change. "Then we will do what we must. We will disable your fleet, return your people safely, and wait for the next opportunity to try again. We have patience, High Commander, infinite patience, because we know that eventually, even the most stubborn minds can learn to see the truth." X nodded slowly. He rose from his chair and offered the human a formal bow. "Thank you for your honesty, Admiral Hayes. Whatever happens, I will remember this conversation." "As will I, High Commander. Safe travels." The shuttle ride back to the endless victory seemed longer than before. X sat in silence, his mind churning with everything he had learned. His officers watched him nervously, wanting to ask questions but not daring to interrupt his thoughts. When they finally docked with the flagship, X went straight to the communication center. He opened a channel to the Imperial capital, Priority 1, direct to the council chambers. "This is High Commander X," he said when the connection was established. "I have critical information regarding the human situation. The council must convene immediately." The response came quickly. The council would meet in 12 hours. 12 hours. 12 hours to prepare a report that would change everything. 12 hours to find the words that would convince proud, stubborn beings to accept a truth they did not want to hear. X returned to his quarters and began to write. He described the human fleet, its power, its capabilities. He explained the conversation with Admiral Hayes, the warnings about threats beyond known space. He outlined the choice being offered, partnership or conflict. And then he added something he had never written in any report before, his personal recommendation. "In my 300 years of service, I have never counseled anything but victory. Today, I counsel something different. I counsel wisdom. I counsel change. I counsel the acceptance of a truth we have long. We are not the greatest power in the galaxy. We are not the masters of all we survey. We are small beings in a vast universe, and if we are to survive what is coming, we must learn to work with others rather than rule over them. I recommend accepting the human offer. I recommend partnership. I recommend hope. He sent the message and waited. The hours passed slowly. X did not sleep. He stood at the viewport watching the human fleet, thinking about everything that might come next. The Council could accept his recommendation. They could reject it. They could remove him from command and send someone else to lead the attack. Any outcome was possible. None of them were certain. When the response finally came, it was not what he expected. High Commander X, the message read, the Council has received your report. After extensive deliberation, we have reached a decision. You are hereby authorized to begin formal diplomatic negotiations with the human species. A delegation will be dispatched to join you within 30 days. The Empire thanks you for your service and your wisdom. May your name be remembered among the great. He read the message 3 times, making sure he understood it correctly. They had listened. They had actually listened. X opened a channel to the human flagship. Admiral Hayes appeared on screen, looking curious. High Commander, is there news? There is. For the first time in longer than he could remember, X smiled. My government has authorized negotiations. We would like to discuss the terms of partnership. Admiral Hayes smiled back. It was a warm expression full of hope and relief. That is excellent news, High Commander, truly excellent. Welcome to the future. Behind them, 2 fleets hung in the darkness of space. One was ancient and proud, the product of 9,000 years of empire. The other was young and strange, built by a species that should have been insignificant. Together, they represented something neither could achieve alone. A chance to face the darkness together. A chance to build something greater than empires or conquests. A chance to prove that even in a universe full of threats and terrors, hope could survive. The future was uncertain. The challenges ahead were immense. But for the first time in a very long time, both species had reason to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. And that was enough. That was more than enough. It was a beginning.